welcome to Live Science. I'm your host, Judy Stroh. With me this week, we have Mindy Weisberger, my coworker. Hi, Mindy.
Hi, Judy. How you doing?
I'm good. I just wanted to turn off the fan because I noticed it was loud. So now my heart's pumping.
Good.
I feel like it's related to something that we're going to be talking about today. So we have a book, another book giveaway.
Yes, that's right. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that's close to my heart and yours. Actually, today's show is literally about the heart. So this, as I'm sure everyone knows, that's that fist-sized organ that has been celebrated in song and story for thousands of years. And it's not only just this very important hunk of muscle that circulates blood through our bodies, but it's also been described as the source of emotions. It's been linked to personality, behavior, and spirituality. And that incredible organ is also the subject of a new book, which we heart, by Bill Schutt, called Pump, The Natural History of the Heart, which will be out September 21st. Bill will be joining us here in just a second. But first, we're going to offer you a chance to win a free copy of Pump. And we're going to pose a trivia challenge about the heart that Bill will answer during our conversation today. So to enter, all you need to do is drop your answer to the trivia challenge in the comments below, and we'll select one winner at random from the correct responses. And you have until 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. That's Wednesday, September 15th to submit an answer. So you ready? You ready, Judy? Okay, so here's the challenge. Early transfusions for human patients sometimes used fluid that was not blood. Name one of those fluids. Now, we'll circulate back to that soon. But for now, I would like to welcome author and zoologist Bill Schutt. Bill?
Nice to be here. Nice to see you again, Mindy.
Nice to see you again, too. Thanks so much for joining us for a heart-to-heart, if you will.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So obviously, the heart is something you're personally acquainted with. You have one yourself. But what intrigued you enough about the heart to write a book on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of definitely a little bit different for me to write a book about the heart. My first nonfiction was about blood-feeding creatures, and my second one was about cannibalism. And so what I've tried to do there was take a topic that is sometimes confusing, sometimes complicated, and to demystify it, to put it zoological slant on it, to tell a bit about some interesting history. And so I really was looking for a follow-up to cannibalism, and my editor and an agent suggested that I look at something that was a bit more mainstream for my third book, and they suggested a couple of topics, and one of them was the heart. So I started to investigate if I could write a book like cannibalism, like Dark Banquet, that went through the animal kingdom, that looked at a structure or historically, and I realized that really there hadn't been anything done like that. There were tons of books about the heart, but there was nothing that sort of followed this structure in invertebrates through the animal kingdom, then looked at myths about it, and then looked at history and advances in the heart. There was no such book, so that made it really easy. And to tell you the truth, I was surprised that there was as much weird and offbeat and interesting material in there. And so it became a real pleasure to write the thing. But initially I was like, me and the heart, but I think it turned out really well, and I think my readers are going to enjoy some of the places that I take them with this one.
Well, we definitely like the weird, the offbeat angle here in Live Science, for sure. So but let's look at the bottom line. So what makes an organ a heart in animal species?
Yeah, I guess you're looking at something. First of all, there has to be some muscle involved. It has to be something hollow. There's muscle tissue, and the muscle is contracting, and it is then therefore sending a liquid through the body, and that liquid, most of the time we're talking about blood. But if you're dealing with, say, insects or crabs or things, you call it hemolymph, because it has a slightly different function, which I get into. But I mean, there are probably some purists out there who believe that the heart there are all of these criteria that have to be met before you could call something a heart. It has to have a specific lining, and I didn't really I spelled that out. So some things that are called hearts in, say, invertebrates, other people might not consider to be a heart. But to me, it was a muscular pump that, and the substance that was being pumped was either blood or hemolymph, and that liquid served a number of purposes, whether it was transporting gases or nutrients and waste. And there was a lot of variation, tremendous amount of variation.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of that variation. So you already mentioned that the fluid that the heart can pump can differ depending on what animal the heart's in. What are some other ways that the heart itself can differ between animals?
Oh, let's see. Well, I guess the main way that it would differ is in the number of chambers. And for example, everyone pretty much knows that we have this 4-chambered heart. But if you look at some invertebrates, that it's really just a piece of muscular tube. So it's really simple. And that leads people to think, well, here's this defective thing. It doesn't work. It's like primitive, blah, blah, blah. In reality, it works perfectly. It does exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And so, we have this mindset that if it's not found in humans, then it must be defective. And one of the things that I was able to spend some time and point out here is that that's just not the case. You've got 2-chambered hearts, 3-chambered hearts. You have circulatory systems like ours. That's a closed circulatory system. So a drop of blood that leaves the heart is pumped out to the lungs, then back to the heart, then out to the body, then back to the heart, and it never leaves the circulatory system. Most of the animals on this planet that have circulatory systems have open circulatory systems. So whatever it is, this pump, you can call it a heart, pumps out this liquid, which travels through a vessel. But instead of continuing on, it gets dumped into a chamber called a hemocoel. And the tissue that surrounds this chamber is fed or has waste drawn away from it, or is delivered oxygen, or gives up carbon dioxide. But there's not this continuum. That's a key difference between vertebrates and invertebrates. Some animals have multiple hearts. Squid, for example, have 3 hearts. 2 of them pump blood to the gills, and when the blood from the gills returns to this main heart, this systemic heart pumps that blood out to the body. So there's a tremendous amount of variation.
Yeah, no, and then of course, even in animals that have hearts that may be somewhat similar in their structure, obviously the size of the animal can make a tremendous difference in terms of the size of the heart. And there's this wonderful illustration in your book of you sitting beneath a whale heart that is quite. It looks like it's about the size of a small car.
Yeah, that's a blue whale heart, and the prologue of this book and the first chapter deal with the fact that my friends at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto were some of them were experts on whales, and one of the questions that they heard again and again was what's the largest heart in the world, and the knee-jerk answer would be, well, it's a blue whale heart. How big is it? Well, we think it's about as big as a sedan, but nobody really knew how big a blue whale heart was. And tragically, 9 of these animals died, and 3 of them actually washed up in Canada. And a team from the ROM went and recovered the heart. Most of the times these whales sink, which is why we've never been able to get a real good look at the blue whale heart. This one didn't, and it floated into this little town. And these guys were able to, over a 5-year period, first they recovered the thing with all sorts of heavy machinery, then they preserved it with thousands of gallons of poisonous material. You talk about spilling a little bit of formaldehyde on yourself and then freaking out. These guys were worried that they were going to fall into a vat of formaldehyde.
Oh no!
Yeah,
that wouldn't be good.
Yeah, so they sent this heart eventually over to Germany, where they plastinated it, and that's a process that people might be familiar with if you've seen some of the exhibits that show humans who have been plastinated. And so that became a big part of this book, because I knew these guys. I'd worked with them and had been friends with some of them for years, and the fact that they got to do this, they were just blown away by it. But the thing that was the most surprising to me and to them was that the heart was much smaller than they thought it was going to be. And that, relatively speaking, if you were to look, for example, at a shrew or a hummingbird, the heart is 3-4 times larger, relatively speaking, than it is in a blue whale. So they had to sort of backtrack from the size of the sedan, and they wound up, they had it's more golf cart sized than it is a large station wagon or something like that. I'm dating myself with station wagon.
No, it's still pretty impressive, but yeah, golf cart is is somewhat smaller than
I think they put it, more like a mini. They had a little next to it. But that heart is back out on display again, and I've been looking forward to going back up there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, obviously, it's you can't really see it in the illustration, but the fact that this is not a model of a heart, that this is an actual preserved heart, is just incredible.
They did an incredible job, and all of the vessels were dyed. They used different color latex when they plastinated this thing, and just that whole process I thought was wild. And then you can see they did a cutaway where you can actually see the vessels that supply the muscle of the heart. And they found out so many strange things about this. It didn't look anything like a human heart when they pulled it out of this whale. 4 of them climbed inside the whale. They spread some of the ribs apart, and they pushed it out from inside the whale. But it sat there like I describe it as kind of like a soup dumpling. It just sort of collapsed. Wow. And so they think that this probably has something to do with the fact that these animals dive to great depths, and the heart is able to collapse when you're reaching 1,500 feet or deeper. But there's so many questions about it. There are blood vessels that are coming out of that heart that they still aren't quite sure what they are.
Well, obviously, one of the advantages of being able to see a heart that's at this scale is that the structures themselves are just that much larger.
Yeah.
So you would really get a sense of things that you might overlook if you would need a lot of highly magnifying equipment to be able to see if you were looking at a smaller heart.
Yeah, it's just a spectacular display if you ever get a chance to go up there. And like I said, it's there now. When I went up, they had just pulled it down. The display was gone. So they had it in something like an aircraft hangar in a big crate. So they had to bust it out of the crate, and they they were just so cool to me. So I was up there writing that story, and my artist friend who does all of my artwork, Patricia J. Wynn, she went up with me and sat there while I interviewed the curators and the staff, and she drew the heart. But just, something that I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, so this is a great example of a heart a heart belonging to another animal that researchers and scientists have invested a lot of time into investigating and preserving. But people have also, for thousands of years, have been asking questions, have been exploring the possibilities of what they can learn about our own hearts based on sometimes limited tools that are at hand. So what are some examples from early in human history of people recording what they knew or what they thought they knew about the heart and how it works?
Well, some of the first I think civilization that I was able to investigate that did quite a bit of work on the heart were the Egyptians, and so you're talking about possibly 1500 BCE, and they were, they believed that. So they saw this thing moving, and they saw it change the rate of beat as it was being stimulated by different emotions, and so they are really they're the founders of this idea of cardiocentrism, which is the fact that the heart is the center of everything. It's the center of intellect. It's the center of what we might call a soul. It's the center of emotion, especially strong emotions like love and hate. And so the Greeks picked up on a lot of the medicine that the Egyptians had done, and so they also picked up on this idea of cardiocentrism, and so from there, the Romans did the same thing. And among the Romans, probably the one who had the most long-lasting effect was a surgeon by the name of Galen, and he lived in the 1st century into the 2nd century CE, and at that time, they were not allowed to do dissections on human bodies. So a lot of the things that he came up with, he used animals, and a lot of it was wrong. And the problem was that years later, after the fall of the Roman Empire, when that book, when his works, and he had written millions of words, 3 million words of his were written. When his works were translated, now they weren't initially translated into Latin. They were translated by Syrian Christians, and they put their slant on the translation. And when the church picked up on it, they read that translation, and even though Galen certainly wasn't a Christian, it's believed that that the fact that he might have been a monotheist had this major effect, and so his word was declared divinely inspired. So everything he had written about medicine, right or wrong, couldn't be questioned, and it stayed that way for 1,500 years, on and off. But it really caused the field of medicine to sort of, I would call it torpor if it lasted for a short period of time. But this was sort of like a hibernation for centuries, not able to do research, just to follow what was written by rote, and that was extremely problematic. But he also was a cardiocentrist, and if he wasn't, then some of the people who are attributed to writing his work, because he may not have written everything that was attributed to him. And so that from there, you've got all these artists, and you've got writers, and you've got poets, and they are all taking this concept of the heart as the center of everything, and they're running with it, and you can see it still today. And so I think that's where that came from, so that was really interesting to sort of ferret out how that whole concept of blue bloods and hot-blooded and all of those things came about. Now we know that there are very few people who think that that's the case now. We certainly think that the brain has a lot more to do with things.
Right, but it's just so interesting to see how just a single person could shape this perspective on the heart just for centuries and centuries. That's just
absolutely. I mentioned to you earlier, I've written 3 books, and in every one of them now, Galen comes up because of how influential he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not in a good way, and he probably he probably came up with a lot of really good stuff, but that's not what he's known for. What he's known for is sort of dragging down the field of medicine for long after he had passed away.
I just want to take a moment to remind our viewers that if you have questions for Bill about any of these things that we're talking about related to the heart, you can drop them in the comments. So getting back to some of the medical practices that were happening quite a bit of time after Galen, but transfusions in particular, there were some interesting ideas about how the heart's work circulating blood around the body could be supplemented.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they did try blood. There were early transfusions, but they didn't try it with humans. They thought that because you've got to remember, they had this idea that emotions was somehow tied in, and mental state was tied into blood. So they saw lambs and they said, well, these are these really mild, gentle animals. If we transfuse some lamb's blood into this guy who's acting crazy, then he'll mellow out. So they did that, and yeah, he mellowed out, probably because he was in renal shock. But when that didn't work, they sort of slid over. So, for example, they looked at milk, and they saw that blobs of fat, and they thought that this was a precursor to red blood cells. They didn't know what red blood cells really were, but they could see them, and they saw them in blood. They weren't sure what they did, so they would transfuse milk into people. They transfused wine. They transfused ale, and so until finally they figured out.
It seems so. Like, why would anyone think that's a good idea from our perspective now?
Yeah, that's a poser. I think one of the reasons is because they could not get blood to transfuse because it would clot. So they tried to work on things that wouldn't clot. And up until the 19th century, they were transfusing milk into people. So it wasn't all that long ago that they finally made the switch. But it was all really difficult to do until this guy Landsteiner came up with this idea of blood typing. That you couldn't just take someone's blood and put it into you, because there are proteins on the red blood cells that your body is going to detect, and if it's not the same as the proteins on your red blood cells, it's going to attack them. So that ABO blood typing was huge. And then they found out after that there were there were several other ways to type blood, the RH factor being one. But,
well, these unusual transfusion fluids aside, what as you were writing the book, what were some of the weirdest, or what was the weirdest heart related thing that you learned while you were writing it?
There was when I saw this question, I put this list together, and I kept changing it because first I thought it was ice fish with antifreeze in their blood, and then I thought about frogs that freeze solid over the course of the winter. Then I started to think about. I went to Harvard and to Worcester Polytech and dealt with researchers who are dealing with a problem that even the heart transplants can be done now successfully. You just don't have enough donor hearts. And so there are thousands of people that die waiting for donor organs. So their idea is, if you're not waiting for an organ that matches you tissue wise or blood type, then what you can do is take so Harold Ott, this guy researcher from Harvard, he would take cadaver heart and put it through a rinsing process that took away all of the cells and left behind the connective tissue. So what you have is, it looks like a heart, and it's really a scaffold. And then the idea is that he wants to take a sample from who's ever going to receive this heart, and you take a sample of skin cells, and you can now convert those skin cells into stem cells. And now you can now convert those stem cells into cardiac muscle cells. And now you're going to take those cardiac muscle cells and seed them into this structure, into this scaffold, and grow a heart. So instead of repairing or replacing with a donor heart, you'll grow a heart from scratch, in a sense, with a structural basis that is based on tissue, connective tissue, that your body is not going to reject no matter what. And so I said to him, well, what about the blood vessels that supply the heart? And he sent me to Dr. Gaudet at Worcester Polytech. And here's a guy who said, he comes out hands me something, and I'm like, that looks very much like a spinach leaf. And he goes, yeah, it is a spinach leaf. We'll take a look at it. And the spinach leaf has these veins, and they're literally taking spinach leaves, hanging them upside down, putting a detergent on them that drains out all of the cell stuff, and they're left with this hollow tubular structure that is made that once again, your body's not going to have a response to it, is not going to reject it, and they want to seed that with blood vessel tissue to grow vessels, and and use those on these hearts. So.
It's interesting seeing how far medicine has come from putting literal milk and ale into human veins to actually taking a spinach leaf and being able to treat it in such a way that you can use the veins from that to potentially reconstruct a heart.
I was completely blown away by that. So that that might have been the strangest thing I saw.
That's pretty incredible. I am seeing from Judy that we have a question from one of our viewers. Judy?
We do. It's a little grammatically interesting, but just in time, from Facebook, said, what is the craziest heart study that you came across throughout your own life's reading?
Oh, the craziest heart study. Boy, I thought I just went over that one. Let's see what else.
That's pretty crazy.
Let's see what else was kind of weird. Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. So back in the 1900s, basically the scientific community said that you cannot do surgery on the heart. Because there are injuries that you're going to, if cutting into this thing is going to damage it so much that you're not going to be able to do any type of surgery you're not going to be able to get inside the heart to do what you need to do. And so there was a German physician, very young guy, who really came up with the idea of catheterization. And so he did it on himself. He used a urethral catheter. And he catheterized himself, sent this catheter up his arm and into his right atrium, and then went and had an associate take pictures of it. And so that allowed people from then on, to deliver medication directly into the heart. Nowadays, we're using it to place artificial valves. And so you don't have to cut through the rib cage. You don't have to cut through the heart itself. You don't have to worry about taking an injection and putting it through your chest and then hoping that it's not going to damage the heart when the needle hits you're hoping it's in the right place. So all of that because of this guy who did the experiment on himself, and they wound up firing him. And then that became one of the most valuable cardiac procedures. So I go through his whole adventure in the book. That was probably the strangest heart-related medical procedure that I learned about and wrote about.
That's talk about putting your heart into your work. So I'm sorry, not sorry. All right, so we have time. We're about to wrap up. We have time for I think one more question. So after having written Pump, do you think about your own heart differently now?
To tell you the truth, if I think about it differently, it's that I never realized that there was so much variation in the animal kingdom. Because you hear and you learn about I taught anatomy and physiology for 20 years. And so you see this structure and you become familiar with all the parts and what they do. But I never really had the appreciation that I do now for how many types of structures there are out there that all get the job done. And in some cases, they do it in a different way. That I'm putting quotation marks around heart of an insect, because in reality, maybe it's not really a heart, but they're able to do what they do because the circulatory system of an insect is not delivering oxygen and carrying away carbon dioxide like ours is. It's delivering nutrients, taking away waste products. So it's doing something different. And just that whole idea that there's just so much variation out there, all of it wildly interesting, all of it works really well. So I try to get people away from this concept of, if it's not human, then it has to be defective or primitive. In reality, that's not the way you should look at things. These structures evolved over millions of years to do a specific job, and they do it really well.
Well, Bill, as always, it's been a pleasure talking to you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for joining us today. And to all our viewers, don't forget to check out Pump, which is out on September 21st. You can pre-order it now, and to be eligible to win a free copy, drop your answer to the trivia challenge in the comments. If you're just tuning in, you can find the challenge. We're going to put it in the description above, or you can watch this video again. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.